Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So some of you did already see the email that we sent a couple hours ago. If you did and you read it, then you have a slight preview. If you didn't, then you're going to get even more now, but you should still read the email later at your own convenience. I just returned from summer camp. Yeah. Summer camp is one of my favorite places on earth. And I grew up going to Osruwe in Wisconsin, and I was pretty sure that that was the only summer camp that I could ever love. And I have returned from URJ Crane Lake Camp in the Berkshires, and I'm very happy to tell you that, in fact, the magic of camp is not limited to geography. Although I was not prepared, Wisconsin, the Berkshires. I had never been in person. I'd been to Eisner. I had not been to Crane Lake, and Crane Lake is really on a mountain. So I did a little more exercising than I expected. However, it was a magical week. I spent time with dear colleagues, some of whom I knew before, some of whom I just met this summer. And as I pulled up to camp on 2 Sundays ago, I got there. They told me to get there around lunchtime. And I pull up, and there's some picnic tables, and there are, it's special activities choices time. It's called Hug, and it's games Hug. And so there are people playing chess, and there's a group of people playing mahjong, like 10-year-olds playing mahjong. It was awesome. And I parked, and I went into the director's office so we could chat a little bit, and I walked into the dining hall, and I gotta be honest, it's like I'd been there the whole summer. You walk in, and that environment is just so welcoming, and people are excited to see you, and there's none, for me, there was none of that awkwardness of, oh, it's my first time here. Everyone was excited to show me where everything was. They were excited to get me to work right away. They had me come up and lead Birkat Hamazon for the camp that I'd never seen before, and kids I'd never seen before, and I didn't know what their little customs during the prayer were. I said, you're all going to have to teach me. Camp was great. And if you read the email, you saw one line that I'm now going to expand on. We were asked at the end of our time as faculty, we were talking with the director who's thinking about fundraising, because in addition to having fun at camp, you got to think about fundraising. And he asked us if we were sitting with a donor for camp, what is one story that we would tell? So I thought about it. Here's my story. On Wednesday of camp, it's important, on Wednesday, we held a limud session. That's a session where the faculty teach something to a group of campers. And the theme for the week was sakranut, which means curiosity. And the lesson we were teaching, we decided to start with a skit, because it's camp, why not? And of course, it was a skit of Moses at the burning bush. And the idea was, who would we be? Where would we be if Moses had not had the curiosity to investigate the bush that was aflame but didn't burn? It requires curiosity. He could have seen it, said, and kept walking. But he didn't. He had the curiosity to step forward. In case you were wondering, because I can hear you wondering, I played the burning bush. So we tell the story. We encourage the kids who are 9, 10, 11 years old to think about how we can be curious. And we're about to move to the next thing, and these 2 10-year-old boys raise their hands, and I feel badly because we got to move on. So I quietly go over to them and say, okay, what's your question? We'll talk about it later, but what's your question? And this 10-year-old boy asks me, but did that story really happen? And I leaned over to him and I said, I'm going to rabbi you right now. Does it really matter? And he sort of got this odd look on his face. I said, we'll continue this later. And of course, I didn't know when we were going to continue it later. It's summer camp. There's a crazy schedule. I assumed if he wanted to talk more about it, he would come find me. So that was on Wednesday morning. On Wednesday night, We had a program called Tournament Tuesday on a Thursday moved to a Wednesday. Such good curiosity you have. They typically have a program called Tournament Tuesday where 2 units will face off against each other in a sport. But on Tuesday, we were at Six Flags, so we couldn't do it. It was supposed to be on Thursday, but then something else got scheduled for Thursday, so it moved to Wednesday. Tournament Tuesday on a Thursday moved to a Wednesday. Duh. Faculty have a very important job at this tournament. We hand out concessions. I heard tell about previous years that it was sort of a balagan and craziness, and it was a very streamlined experience, feeding concessions to hundreds of people. I was responsible for the soft pretzels and the churros. That was my domain. And as bunks are being called up and I'm handing out concessions, these 2 boys from earlier came up to me and said, "Can we talk more about that? I'm covered in salt and oil and churro dust, and the boys are covered in snow cone." And I said, "Oh, sure." So they stood here. Every 3 seconds I had to say, "Okay, hold on. Churros, pretzels, churros, have fun." Okay, where were we? And they stayed. They could have been watching the older units play soccer and football against one another, like most of the camp was doing, but instead they decided they wanted to come talk to the rabbi about our conversation that we'd started earlier. And this is what we talked about. Where did the Torah stories come from? Was it God? Was it people? Some nice combination of the two? Who is God? How does God behave in the world? One boy said, "I don't believe in God." I said, "Okay, can I ask you a question? Do you not believe in God, or are you not sure about God?" He said, "Well, I believe in science, and I just haven't yet, I don't know about this God." I said, "You're not an atheist, you're agnostic." We had to explain what agnostic meant. And then we got to the idea of a sunset. Because the boy who loved science said, I said, "How do I know God's in the world? When I see something beautiful, it reminds me that God's in the world. Like a sunset. The sunsets in the Berkshires are beautiful." And it was setting as we were having this conversation, and he said, "But the sunset is scientific. I can tell you why that happens. And having the sun lets our crops grow, and we need the sun to survive. So it's science." I said, "Okay, but does it have to be so beautiful?" And he stopped, turned around, snow cone in hand. I'm throwing pretzels at people. He turned back around and he said, "That's it." And then they walked away. That was the whole moment. Why is that the moment that's sticking with me? Why is that the moment that I would tell a donor about in order to fundraise for summer camp? When is the last time that you asked a question like that? Not necessarily a Jewish question, and not necessarily to your rabbis, although we're here to have those conversations anytime. But when was the last time you experienced real wonder, had a question, and genuinely were interested in discovering an answer? To me, it's a good reminder, first of all, that at Jewish summer camp, there is no such thing as the wrong moment to speak Torah. There's no such thing as the wrong moment for a s'mores. There is space for both at all times. It's also a reminder to me that when I'm feeling uninspired, when I'm feeling a little heavy, to look to our youth for inspiration, the youths. They see the world in their own way, and they are unburdened by the baggage of adulthood that so much of us carry. They do not know it all. The fact is, neither do we, but many of us approach the world as though we do. We have to teach the next generation to grapple with difficult concepts. When those boys asked me, "But did it really happen?" And they asked it in a super snarky way. I think they were expecting to ask the rabbi, "But did it really happen?" And for the rabbi to say, "Yes, now shush and do what we told you." They were very surprised to receive a question in return that did not negate their question, but furthered it. It's always the appropriate time to talk about these difficult concepts, whether it's Torah or politics or the world and all its challenges. And that grappling, that's what we need to teach, because the fact is, we can look up any information we want on the internet, on the phones we hold in our hands, on the computers in our laps, maybe someday the computers that live in our heads, right? We can look up facts. If I want to know what date something happened, there's really no need to memorize that. I can look it up. But what we need to do is teach what we do with the information once we get it. It's one thing to look up a date that something happened. It's another thing to realize the context of the world when it was happening, or put it in order in our heads. It's another thing to have a moral grounding to the way we see the world, to keep our minds both intelligent and nimble to change as we gain more insight. And so much of that is learned outside the classroom. And by the way, we adults still need to be working on that too. We learn it and we grapple with things in synagogue and at camp, in our houses, sometimes covered in concession stand detritus. We are always grappling. So as I was mentioning to a few of you before the service started, it is, in fact, the first of Elul. That's a deep rabbinic breath we take when we realize there's just one Hebrew month left until Rosh Hashanah. This is when we begin that process of cheshbon hanefesh, the accounting of our souls. It's an opportunity this month to reacquaint ourselves with ourselves. Remember who we are. Realize who we actually are, not just who we think we are or who we were last year. It's a month to seek inspiration. It's a month to think about who we want to be. This is my inspiration. I'm sharing it with you. Maybe it inspires you. It's those two young men, absolutely covered in snow cone goop. No thought for what they looked like. No thought for the fact that this might not be a good time to discuss Torah and God. No thought for the fact that their friends were sitting on the hill watching a soccer game. Because in their minds, they could not imagine that there would be boundaries to where and when, or even if they should ask that question. So this year, I want to approach life with more of that awe, more amazement, and more questions. And having a few additional soft pretzels wouldn't hurt either. So what will your approach be in 5787? Shabbat Shalom.